it gives me tremendous pleasure to introduce Pat Wright. I actually don't think I've ever done this before, as I can recall, which is odd, because we've known each other for a long time. We met a couple of times in America, but I really got to know Pat in 1990, when I had my first, and by the way, Carl, only sabbatical to date in my career. And I'd met Pat, and I knew she worked on lemurs, and I'd been teaching about primate behavior, but I didn't know anything about primate behavior. I just read about it. So I said to Pat, can I come to Madagascar and collect data for you? And she said, well, wouldn't you rather do some research? I said, no, honestly, I wouldn't. I'd really like to come and watch lemurs and record whatever you do and eventually maybe see my name in the acknowledgements of a paper. So Pat was kind enough to say I could show up, which I did in 1990. And we spent 6 weeks together, I think, in the field, including lots of nighttime trips looking for eyes and things. And I discovered that Pat was this incredible human being, an incredible scientist. I mean, I learned that for her dissertation, she was the first person to ever study a nocturnal monkey in South America while carrying her 3-year-old daughter, Amanda, in the forest at night, in the dark. And then she discovered a species of lemur, the golden bamboo lemur in Madagascar, and created a national park to protect this. And so one day, so we go to this national park. It wasn't much of a park at that time. There was one little building. It was myself and my then wife, Wendy, and Pat's brother, Ted, who's here with us today. And Pat had to do something, so she said, I'm going to leave you here for a couple of days, and here's what you do. And after like a week, we start to think a little bit. After 10 days, it's like, I hope Pat's okay. And after 12 days, when we ran out of food, we're like, maybe we better walk down to town and see what's happening. And eventually Pat came up and she got sucked into some other political thing or fundraising or whatever it was. And I knew this wasn't malicious because her brother was there too. So it's not like, this was targeted anyway. But it was just, and it was in the course of that visit that I said one day, we were walking down the main street in Antananarivo in the capital city of Madagascar. I said to Pat, I'm chairing a search at the moment to hire a primate behavior person. And I suddenly realized if we could hire Pat Wright, we would have a primate behavior visibility immediately, and then we could hire whoever else we wanted to. And she was at Duke, which had been the other university that was pretty good at what we did at the time. It wasn't particularly easy to persuade her to come to Stony Brook, but eventually we did, and that made Stony Brook better and Duke less good. So it was a real win. And when Pat came here, she was an assistant professor, for heaven's sake. She had already done all this stuff. She came here as an associate professor, fortunately. And she created this incredible institute and brought people from all over the world and has just become very much part of the face of Stony Brook University. And I think that I'm really glad that we had that conversation. I'm really glad it worked out. So with that, over to Pat Wright.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Lawrence. That was fantastic. Both the talk and also the introduction. It's true. I wouldn't be here at Stony Brook if it wasn't for Lawrence Martin. And he was just practicing on me. Because the next person he convinced to come to Stony Brook was Richard Leakey. Let's talk about Madagascar. When Lawrence is talking about, long time ago, that's kind of nothing compared to Madagascar. It was 150 million years ago when it was Gondwana land then, a big, massive continent in the south, when the tectonic plates started to shake and bring the world apart to where it is today. Madagascar is that yellow little bit there. By 100 million years ago, it was alone in the Indian Ocean. But it had sort of like a humpback. It had that big green thing attached to it. And then suddenly, the tectonic plates started to move again. And India took off and hit Asia and became what it is today, the subcontinent of Asia, and left Madagascar all alone in the Indian Ocean in splendid isolation. Madagascar had the opportunity to evolve some of the most amazing creatures on this earth. Now, I study lemurs, so I really appreciate the lemurs and all their diversity, over 110 species. But it's not just lemurs. You have frogs and birds and butterflies and insects, all kinds of things that are really extraordinary on this island because it was alone. Now, I want you to look at this map for a minute. Now, it's situated kind of in the middle of the universe there, Madagascar. Notice it's only a couple of 100 miles off the coast of Africa. But the first people that arrived on the island of Madagascar it was really late, about 2,000 years ago. And they came, I don't know whether I can do this, but they came from Borneo. Is this going to work? Nope. Yeah, over here in Asia, that big island is Borneo. Those people must have been so brave to take a ship and get all that way. But only 2,000 years ago. We're not talking millions of years ago. 2,000. And they made a big impact. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, Madagascar looks small, as Lawrence said. Africa is the largest continent. And if you took Madagascar and put it next to the US, it would go from Maine all the way to Florida. And it feels like that when you're on those roads. It's a very, very big place. But the biodiversity is so extraordinary. You have those incredible baobab trees and the star orchid that Darwin predicted with their relationship with the hawk moths. I mean, as I said, the lemurs are incredible. Lots of biodiversity found nowhere else on Earth. Sad story, though, because 91% of all lemurs are in one of the red list threatened categories. That's the largest proportion of any group of mammals. So lemurs are on the brink of extinction. Why? It's because of deforestation, fires, and erosion. It's because of subsistence hunting by humans. And I'm not going to talk too much about that. It makes me too sad. And we have evidence that there was an incredible megafauna on Madagascar, and not too long ago. There's 18 species of lemurs that have gone extinct within the past 500 years. 500 years. I mean, Rome was 500 years ago. And they're giant lemurs, big animals. Look at that. Oh, would you want to meet that? I would like to meet it, yes. It's a gorilla-sized animal. It's 350 pounds. Wow. Or maybe Megalodopus. It's a chimp size. But look how weird it was with its long skull. And there's Propithecus. The nose on that is fascinating. And it was arboreal. In fact, all of these animals were arboreal. That means they lived in trees. Look at the hand on that Propithecus. It's curved. Every bone is curved like an orangutan's. And we know what orangutans do. They just kind of glide over the canopy using those big curved digits. The animals were incredible. 17 species of giant lemur gone. But the lemurs are nothing compared to some of the other fauna. I mean, this is the world's heaviest bird to ever walk this earth. 990 pounds, 10 feet tall. I wouldn't want to meet that one. There is a written account that says that some of these early explorers actually met one of them in the south of Madagascar, maybe. But look at that egg, 10 kilograms. You could fit 150 chicken eggs in it. It's the largest single cell in history. And they were all over Madagascar. If you come to Madagascar, and I hope you will, you're going to be able to see these shells on the beaches everywhere. And hippos. Now, you wouldn't think that hippos would have been able to get to Madagascar, but somehow they did. We don't know how old the oldest one is, or we have somebody do it now, but hippos. Pygmy hippos, though, that cute one that's on the internet now? That size of them, but not related to them. They're more related to the Eastern African hippopotamus. I just want you to look at the hippopotamus molars, okay? It looks like ribbon candy, right? I mean, they're really, you see them, it's a hippo. And there's fusas, predators. There are 3 species of this mongoose-like predator, bigger than the ones today. Horned crocodiles. They have like horns. I mean, that's crazy, right? But we found them. Tortoises, big giant tortoises like Aldabra. And all this extinct fauna lived together not so long ago. And so it's like really a question that I started asking when I first got to Madagascar. And I flew over Madagascar, and I saw that most of Madagascar is destroyed. It's gone. It's just like a wasteland. And these little tiny pockets, those are the green bits there of forest, are extraordinary with this extraordinary sets of animals. But the rest of it, all that white, is just destroyed. Now you can look at those fuchsia bits. And the fuchsia bits are all the parts that were deforested between 1990 and 2000. So the destruction continues. But there's a lot of real debate on how in the world could people that came over just 2,000 years ago really destroy that much forest when it's so difficult to get around even today. We gathered together in 1995 at the University of Chicago to talk about this. Everybody was having a totally different theory about why Madagascar was so devastated. I mean, Ross McPhee from the American Museum of Natural History, he said it had to be a pandemic, that there was some kind of a disease that just wiped all those animals out 2,000 years ago. And I'm thinking, being a biologist, the reptiles and the amphibians and the lemurs, and why are all the ones that were wiped out the big ones? We had lots of different theories. Some people said, well, there was a big savanna before, and it's just, expanded. But I'm thinking, I took a lot of botany, and I know that there's very few grass species in Madagascar, and those that are there are just way up in the tops of the mountains, and they're just not. What's taking over Madagascar is imperator grass, which is a invasive from Asia. And there's no giraffes, and there's no elephants, and there is not one animal that you can trap when you're in this vast wasteland. So how in the world could that have been evolving over all these years? But, there were these arguments. There were 100 of us all together, and 25 got chapters in that book. And we discussed, and nobody came up with any really good consensus of what they believed. And that bothered me. That bothered me because it's really important for us to understand the history of Madagascar. But we're handicapped. There's fauna sites all over Madagascar. You can see all those little bits and dots. Those are fossil sites, 2,000 years old, 1,000 years old. There are dinosaurs in Madagascar. We have dinosaurs. You can see one in the Humanities Building. That came from northwest of Madagascar. Dinosaurs that lived 88 million years ago, 87 million years ago. But then that meteor struck in Mexico, and the world went dark. And all the dinosaurs disappeared, even the ones on Madagascar. And what happened after that? We don't know. Why? Because we don't have any fossils. We don't have the Oligocene, the Eocene, the Miocene. We don't have any fossils that have been found in Madagascar, filling in those blanks. So when I tell you that I think that the lemurs, some ancestor came over from Africa, maybe 50 million years ago, I won't call it bullshit, but it's close. Because luckily we have DNA, and DNA, traces these things back to a certain extent. Yeah. And of course, I particularly stayed on Madagascar because the first animals to arrive were lemurs. After all those animals were wiped out, lemurs came first. So lemurs are in the driver's seat. When you talk about pollination, when you talk about seeds dispersal, they just went all over that island and took all the best niches. Everybody else had to take what was left. So that's why I study lemurs. But I'm really interested in the fossils. And that's why I'm going to tell you 3, maybe 4 stories about how we are beginning to understand a little bit more about what happened on Madagascar. And this starts with the time that Germain called me up. He called me up and he said, I've got dinosaur bones. I just discovered a whole bunch of dinosaur bones. And I said, who are you? And he said that he dug for fossils, not for fossils. He dug for sapphires and he found fossils. So I went to visit him, and it was an amazing experience because it was kind of right in the middle of Madagascar. Look where that is. If you were walking, which most early humans had to do, you could walk 4 days to the right, the left, or south, and you would, 4 days is a long time to walk. And whatever happened in Christmas River happened there in the middle of it all. That's what it looks like. It just looks like it's a vast, kind of devastated place. The grasses are there, and they're burned every year. And over there, let's see if we can no. Anyway, on the left-hand side there is the place where we decided to dig. I hired 15 sapphire diggers to dig 15 days, 15 meters down. Think about that for a minute. This is an action photo. You see the dirt going. Yeah. And you see there's no fossils, there's no bones for 15 meters, just clay and sand. And then we hit a layer, and it was gray, and it really smelled bad, like a swamp. And in that layer was the bones. Where's all these bones? There were tortoises. There were the big birds. There were 5 species of lemurs. It was like amazing. Lots of bones. And of course, we brought some of them back and we had them dated. Oh, look at those dates. I was so excited because we had hippos and elephants and turtles and tortoises and crocodiles. and even a piece of wood, all were around the same time, around 9,000, almost 10,000 years ago. And I was so excited because 10,000 years ago, there weren't any people in Madagascar. So I had a whole ecosystem that hadn't had human intervention. So I was very excited to go back there. Yeah, until this graduate student from UK, James Hansford, wrote me an email and said he wanted to study elephant birds and he wanted to come and see my fossils. And I said, fine. And he came down to Ranomafana, and I'll show you a picture of our research station in a minute. But our research station, because it's Stony Brook's. He got there, and I reached into a cabinet where I was keeping this incredible bone. And it was huge. It was huge. It was a leg of an elephant bird. And I handed it to him. And I said, here you are, James. Here's my bone. And he was like looking at it. And suddenly he said, you know what you have here, don't you? And I said, Apiornis maximus, so proud that I knew the Latin name. And he said, no, that's not what I mean. And he pointed to the bone. And I said, no way. No, it's absolutely not possible. I said, these bones have been dated in 3 different labs. They are 10,000 years old. No. And he said, yes, they are. They're tool marks. They're tool marks made by humans 10,000 years ago. I brought these bones back, and I went to Richard Leakey. And I said, Richard, you really think they're tool marks? He said, yeah, they're tool marks. I took him down to National Geographic in Washington. I said, do you think they're tool marks? They said, yes. And then I just went to National Geographic and got some, money to look at them even more. And they are indeed tool marks. You know what that means? Well, first of all, as following up on what Lawrence said, these people came over 2,500 years ago, the people of today, then came on a boatload from Africa, Bantu. We have the genes, so we know that they were Bantu. And that Bantu Y chromosome just kind of spread all over Madagascar. So we know, and in the paper that was written a year before our paper, they said there was no trace of anybody else until the French came, but that's real recent. And that's okay. The Vizimba, the people that the Malagasy have a myth that they come before, they weren't in the gene pool. So we got out our paper right away. Early Holocene human presence in Madagascar evidenced by exploitation of avian megafauna. And so we basically pushed the human arrival back 8,000 years. So that means that there were humans there earlier than we thought. But there's still a lot of questions. Okay, so just to summarize, there were people there earlier, and they reached the center of Madagascar there because, it wasn't like they came for lunch and they just, stopped in. I mean, they were really there. And these people ate hippos and elephant birds, because I looked at my hippo bones and I saw the same kind of marks. And we don't know where these people came from. We have no idea. And we don't know whether those people started the deforestation so early. Lots of questions yet. As I tell my undergraduates, we don't know nothing yet, but we've started. We like to make a little progress. Okay, second story. This is the story of Leona. Called me up. She said she just finished she got a master's in ecotourism, and she wanted to bring ecotourists to her town. And I said, where's your town? She said, Ihusi. Now, I've been to Ihusi. There is nothing in Ihusi that a tourist would want to see. I said, oh, and what do you want to bring the tourists to? And she said, there's a cave, and there's some forest. And I said, okay. Like dismissing it. But eventually, I went 5 hours by car over some of the worst roads. Then we had to walk. There it is. It's really close to Christmas River. Then we had to walk in this vast, grassland another about 4 hours, 5 hours. Then we camped, and then we went to the cave. And the cave was kind of a bust. There were just a couple, there were no fossils in it, but just a couple bats. And then I said, how about the forest? Look, there's no forest there, right? There's no forest there. As we're walking up, there is nothing for miles and miles. And we're walking up higher and higher. Devastation from every direction. It isn't that high. You know, it looks like it's the Andes, but it's only 1,600 meters high. And we get up there. I call it Crystal Mountain because there's so much silica, and there's a lot of quartzite and quartz boulders. And then came the forest. There was a forest there. And we were amazed because we know all the forest trees. And we were running into that forest, and we could see Rutra, and we could see Rahika, and we could see all the trees that we knew from Ranomafana in the middle of this vast wasteland. And we went, oh, wow. We got to find out the animals that are here. And I was hoping that we see one of those subfossil lemurs. I'll tell you, I was hoping. But so far, not yet. It was beautiful inside. Streams, crystal clear streams, beautiful trees. And the rain would come every day, you know. There'd be a cloud that would come up. It made its own rain. And then the rain would come down in the afternoon. It was an amazing place. Waterfalls. Incredible. And it was protected by that crystal mountain because the fires couldn't get to it. You know, you could see a fire would come and it would just go out because it couldn't get to that forest. Now I got a few, I don't know, 30, something like 30 biodiversity scientists who came to look at what was there. It was much bigger when we finally got the mapping out. It was much bigger than we ever thought. It's a really big hunk of forest. And what we found with those biodiversity surveys were amazing. We've got like 3 new species of frogs. We've got new species of lemurs. Of course, only the mouse lemurs and some of the chirogalias. And they are closely related to lemurs that are very far south. Not the ones that I live more in the west most of the time, I mean in the east. Okay. And there were a real surprise. Lemur cata, found only in the dry forest, and it was there in the rainforest, changing its behavior because you can't see anything in the rainforest, and they're used to having these fancy tails where they visually signal each other. It was very exciting to find all of this. And as we determined where all these animals were from, I realized it was a jigsaw of species. We had those incredible bats that were way up in the northwest, and we had all the birds were from the east. And we had chameleons that came from the west and the east. And we had some of the reptiles that were like closely related to iguanas that were from the west. And somebody actually found that amazing, look at that thing, looks like a worm. It's a typhlops, and it's found only in sand dunes way in the south. So all of these animals were from different areas of Madagascar. And to me, that was some evidence and proof that at one time, all of Madagascar was connected. And these were just kind of left in the middle of the fires. So we published a paper, A Surprising Haven, the biodiversity of an old-growth forest amidst a scorched landscape in Madagascar. So that was our second clue of what had happened in Madagascar in the past. So summary, it's 1,600 hectares in the middle of Madagascar. Not very many people because it's been burned so much there isn't any agriculture. And there are species from all over Madagascar in that forest. Now, my third story. This is about Ranomafana. This is where I made the national park with a little help from a lot of friends, and where we have an extraordinary rainforest that has 45,000 hectares, and it has like 15 species of lemurs, all St. Patrick. We made it a national park in '91. It became a World Heritage Site in 2007. The lemurs are just extraordinary, and you can see them if you come. And we built this research station that's quite different than the one that Lawrence was talking about, because we don't have very much space. It's very mountainous there. And so we had to build, a taller research station than was possible than you would have to build in Kenya. It's beautiful. You're invited. And then I have graduate students. I have wonderful graduate students. And one of them's name is Florence. And Florence, she came from Cameroon. She's from Africa. And she came to be my graduate student. She wanted to be studying things in Madagascar. So we outlined this research project where she was going to go and study sifakas in the northern part of the park, where we hadn't been for a long time, way before COVID. We just haven't been there. And so when she came back, she was all excited. She'd succeeded in finding, all these different groups of sifakas, and we have, their genetics and everything. That was great. That's code word. The genetics is code word for poop. That's where we get our genetics from. Anyway, so Florence told me, she said, when I was up there at the very beginning of the first transect, I found a cave. I said, Florence, I've been up there in the northern part of the park so many times. There's no caves in the northern part of the Ranomafana National Park. How big is it? She said, no, I know it was a cave. Because I took a course from Dominique Stratford, and he told me how to look for a cave. I know it's a cave. Okay. So I'm telling this story at dinner at the research station, and suddenly Michael says, oh, I've been in a cave before. And then MJ Ingmanson says, I've been in lots of caves. And then Alicia Del Prado from Spain says, I'm a paleontologist. I just came here to study lemurs, but I'm really trained as a paleontologist. And my husband said, I got ropes. That was November 8th. And the next day, they went up to that cave. And what they found, I would never have predicted. I would have never even come close to thinking that they could find this. There's the cave, and there's bones. Do you see those bones? Can you see them? They look like leg bones, don't they? This is the discovery of November 9th, 2024. This is MJ, and she's looking down there at these bones. It's a cranium. And there's a mandible, and there's molars, and there's tusks. As soon as I saw the molar, I knew what it was. I knew what it was, because the only animal that has a molar like that and tusks like that is a hippopotamus. A hippopotamus in a pristine rainforest. Steep, oh my God, it was steep up there. What in the world? And I looked at that, and I don't know, it doesn't look too old, does it? And I remember a story that one of my guides said, but his grandfather told him that if he ever ran into a really big animal out in the forest, to not to run away, but to go to the side or lay down in a ditch, because it would run him right over because it didn't have good eyesight. I don't know. Look at those molars. It's just amazing. Well, you know what I did? I called the Leakey Foundation. November 9th, it was discovered. November 10th, I'm like talking to Leakey about money, because, we have to excavate this. Didn't know whether we get some, but they said maybe for an emergency grant we could do it. And they did. And we got Dominique to come over, because he's a real paleontologist, and he's worked in South Africa in caves. And he came over, and we worked very closely with the University of Tana and the paleontologists there, and the Madagascar National Park, because it's inside the park itself. How many permits did we have to get? Wow, but we did it, and we got those wonderful bones out, and hopefully they'll be here at Stony Brook soon. There's my incredible graduate students and the techs and the professors and everybody together. We were really happy. It's amazing. You have to realize this is the first bones of an extinct animal found in its habitat. This is where it lived. I mean, those other bones that you saw all over Madagascar, they're found, in areas that are burned over, and the habitat just isn't there anymore. But the habitat's there in Ranomafana National Park. The hippo molars and the tusks were there. And then we found 13 more caves. And in one of those caves, we found another tusk, so we got at least 2 hippos. Now there's sediment like this, and we're going to try to get some money and go back and am I hoping that in that sediment there's some lemurs. And I bet you there are new species too, because in the eastern rainforest, the lemurs are all different than they are in the western rainforest, the extant ones. Okay, there's a tusk. And this is a forest hippo. So, how old are these hippos? Well, we'll find out. Were there other taxa, such as elephant birds and tortoises and horn? Well, I don't think the crocodile's going to be up there. Anyway, we're organizing our next expedition for June 2025, and you're welcome to come if you really like steep mountains and deep caves. And then that gave us more insights too into the past, because what I'm always thinking about is what did Madagascar look like in the past where we don't have any fossils. And so there was one last clue, and that just happened. I was in Madagascar, and the forest was on fire. It was. I mean, we never had a fire inside the rainforest before. And suddenly it was like crackling around me, and we were just, and big trees were coming down, and the lemurs were screaming and running around, and the chameleons couldn't go fast enough, and they just burnt up. It was a really horrible scene. But we got 1,600 people to go and help us put it out, and we put it out. And then the rains came. So right now, everything's okay in Ranomafana. But when I was out there, watching that fire really close to it, my feet got hot. My feet got hot. And I looked down, and I realized that it was like a peat forest, that there was a layer of peat on this highland forest. This is different than a rainforest that we have in the lowland, on the other side. This was like a thick peat, and it smolders underneath. And it can spread and spread. And then when I talked to the local people, they said, oh yeah, we first saw this fire December 20th. I said, why didn't you get us here earlier? And they said, well, it would stop, and then it would come up again. So then I realized the way I had been thinking is that the rest of this rainforest that might have covered the rest of Madagascar might have been like the rainforest that's on the eastern side, but not the western side. That on the western side is it's a combination of lichens and other things like peat moss, and that could have spread the fires without any human intervention once it got started for a very long time, every year until the rains came. So that's one of the clues of what happened to the center of Madagascar. Those are things that we've just recently found out. I don't know when we're going to really understand. I don't think until we start finding some of those bones in the Miocene, the Oligocene. And of course, the reason why we had this fire is because of the drought, and that's because the climates are changing. So, altogether, people came here earlier. There were fauna and flora all over, I think, that area that's in the center part of Madagascar. The hippo bones show us that some of those subfossil lemurs were in the rainforest where we are now, and we understand that could have spread more because of the peat fires. So I just want to thank all of you that helped with any of these projects, and I really thanks to the team, because we don't have small teams when we go out on these expeditions, because we want to find out as much biodiversity as possible. So we have experts in every kind of biodiversity. And of course, our funders are important. That's my website if you want to go and see what other things we're doing. We're doing a lot with the communities, with education and restoration ecology and health. But you know what I'd like to do to finish up? I want to show you a film. I'm not going to show you the whole film because it's 50 minutes, but this is just the short, and I don't know that I can really make this go, but it's very short, I promise. Oh, there it is. There we are. See how devastated it is. We've got a fire. It has about 500 meters before it's going to hit the main forest. We got to get it out. Wow. That's Mai. She's in this room. She studies leeches. There are 30 scientists, so we have 30 days to find the secrets of the forest. It's an amazing forest. I'm really glad we found it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention. And thank Carl. I thank Carl for inviting us. And what a great duo, right? I mean, I haven't heard Lawrence talk for a long time, and it brought back so many memories. And a lot of us have already been to TBI, an amazing place.
Thank you for an amazing talk. We have time for 2 brief questions.
Thanks, Pat. That was really great. So you've done so much in Madagascar, for Madagascar. Is it time for you now to help create a national fire service?
I think it's time. You're right. Because when we were there facing these fires, we realized that, we don't have, like in the States, when you were having the fire here in LA, we were having the fire in Madagascar, and we don't have huge planes that can dump water. We don't have, and I think that's one of the things that we've been discussing, and I know some of you have given us funding to put out that fire, and we put out that fire, but we also had enough left over, so we're trying to work together to make a fire plan. And everybody's on board with that. I mean, we had the Minister of Environment was there, and we're making a plan. So hopefully next year, by the time we get to next year, it'll be okay.
So one more round of applause for Patrick.